Hey, what's up, everybody?
And welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 332. And today we are going to be looking at a case that is very close to home for all of us, literally very close. And this case is unsolved to this day. We're going to be talking about the Valentine's Day murders of Stephanie Hart-Grizzell and Nick Kunselman. And this case, I'll warn you ahead of time, very frustrating and confusing. It just leaves you like, I probably shouldn't cuss in the first 30 seconds. What?
No, it does though.
What the hell happened here?
It's frustrating because the murders take place in a Subway restaurant, the Subway franchise, and they were shot to death. They were found on the morning of Valentine's Day, and you would think that there would be loads of evidence to be collected at the scene, and they definitely collected loads of evidence, but out of that evidence, it seems like very little led to a suspect, and then the suspect was even seen by another employee that happened to be there in the early morning hours.
Potential suspect,
yeah. And there's just nothing. They've never been able to track down this individual who they believe is their suspect, and this is now 20 plus years later, and we're still trying to figure out what happened. Seems like there's definitely some animosity there between the investigating authorities, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, and Kelly. We'll explain why, because she has her own incident with them. And I think that may even play a little bit into maybe why this case hasn't gotten quite as far. But
potentially,
it's a very frustrating one,
especially because they were so young too. These two, and it's such beautiful young people. Like they just seemed like
high school sweethearts.
Yeah, definitely that. But just salt of the earth, ahead of their time. It's just heartbreaking, and there's no answers. It just doesn't make sense why anyone would want to do this to the two of them. And then in covering their case, we're also going to be telling you about an unsolved disappearance and an unsolved triple homicide, and how those cases might relate to Nick and Stephanie's case as well. So lots to go over. Let's go ahead and jump in. As always, I'm your host, Kendall.
I'm your host, Josh.
And we are joined by our production team, Ian and Janelle.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
So Stephanie Hart-Grizzell was born on October 28th, 1983 in Littleton, Colorado, which is a home-ruled municipality. And Littleton is a very interesting town. It's situated between Arapahoe, Jefferson, and Douglas counties. Littleton is the seat of Arapahoe County. And the city's history dates back to 1859, when the area was irrigated and settled by a man named Richard Sullivan Little, whose namesake the town adopted when it officially became incorporated in 1890. Although at this current point in time, Littleton is fully considered within the Denver metropolitan area, and its home-ruled municipality status allows city planners to decide and approve budgets without any oversight or approval from Denver. Littleton prides itself on its more small-town, old-timey feel, and that's a lot from their historic downtown.
Beautiful place,
yes,
by the way.
It
Been
is.
there a number of times.
Yes, many, many times. I think we've all had many Littleton experiences.
If you are ever in Denver and you find yourself over in Littleton, go check out the Melting Pot, okay?
It is a franchise across the country.
It is a franchise, but the location is a very, very old. It's a historical building. I think it was like a jail, a library.
And a library, yeah.
And then it was a bank, I believe.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, right.
Correct.
Yeah, because they have a vault in there.
Yeah. Very cool. Very good food.
Yeah. Pretty much always catch us there on Valentine's Day.
Yep.
Except not this year. Yeah. So don't come looking. But yeah, we got engaged at a melting pot. Not that one, though.
No, it was not as cool.
No, it should have been that one. But anyway, we do love Littleton. And it's important to note that Lockheed Martin has one of its major campuses in the area, and that thousands of people across the 11 unincorporated communities within Littleton work for the weapons manufacturer.
Yeah, they have a bunch of different buildings all over the place. I think one of the coolest buildings is the Deer Creek facility, because it's right up against the mountains, and in this area there's tons of red rock protruding from the ground, like big giant. I mean, there's Red Rocks Amphitheater, as all of us probably know, but it's a beautiful area. But yeah, there's tons of Lockheed Martin employees around there.
They also have an excellent brewery, Breckenridge Brewery. If you're ever looking for something to do, it's outdoors, it's beautiful. Nice views.
What else can we promote? Oh, the Alamo movie theater.
It's
That's
right
a great
next to it.
location.
It's right next.
Mhm.
There used to be a great comic store, Molden's Comics. I
Oh.
used to go there every Wednesday, and then he shut down without telling me.
That is
That's
so unfair.
heartbreaking.
Really sad, yeah.
There's also the Santa's Workshop Village, some Christmas store that's there year round.
Oh, very nice.
Yep.
Very nice.
They got a cherry cricket recently.
A what?
A cherry cricket
That place
because
sucks.
I've never heard of
fucking,
it.
it's the burgers are
My
sick
dad
with
loves
crap.
that place.
They're like good burgers, but they just put too much crap on them.
They're
It's-
crap burgers.
They're crap burgers.
Oh no. Oh no.
The Deer Creek campus there were many take your kid to work days, and they don't show the kids the missiles, but they show you the satellites, and they show you what happens when you freeze a banana with nitrogen.
Oh,
What
what
happens?
happens?
It becomes really hard, and you can break it.
Oh, okay.
It's like-
Yeah, it's cool.
Mhm.
It's cool stuff.
I used
Shatters
to love,
like glass.
Exactly, though.
Yeah.
I used to love in school when did you ever have a science teacher that would show you, make Dippin' Dots with the nitrogen?
No.
Oh,
What?
so fun. Yeah.
What kind of
Just pour
science teacher you got?
the best. Oh, he was so
Made
great.
homemade Dippin' Dots?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the coolest thing I ever did in a science class was make,
Ice cream.
Tylenol.
What?
Tylenol.
They showed you how to make drugs?
Yeah, I made Tylenol in my chemistry class.
That's kind of cool. Was that in high school though?
Yeah.
Did you try it?
Yeah.
Did it?
Yeah, it worked.
Did it help?
Yeah, it worked.
But yeah, most importantly, many families moved to the suburbs within Littleton to raise families away from the city while still having easy access to Denver via the highways. And that was precisely the case with Stephanie's family.
Stephanie's mother, Kelly Grizzell, described her as a, quote, flower child who wanted to, quote, go live in a teepee in the wilderness and survive by being an artist, painting and making jewelry. Stephanie had many friends growing up, and Kelly said this was because she had such a pure heart that people just wanted to be around. Stephanie was also unlike other kids her age. She hated television and believed that, quote, technological advancement is making the world a cold, hard place where people stare at their screens rather than relate to those around them.
Stephanie was
Facts.
so far ahead of her time. And
Because, yeah, this was like right at the beginning
yeah. Mhm.
where this was, cell phones are starting to pop up. People are rocking pagers and
Yeah.
then TVs were, evolving from their early stages,
Mhm.
tubes
Yep.
to screens. And
And now screens are just
now we have personal,
Everywhere.
laptops were a huge deal if you had one at this
Mhm.
time.
Yep.
And now we have things that are far more powerful than laptops at that time in our pockets and
Yeah.
on our wrists.
Mm-hmm.
And all we do is just stare at them, it seems like. But Stephanie also really loved music, and she'd often show her mom some of her favorite songs, including Pink Floyd's On the Turning Away, and discuss life's mysteries with one another. According to an article in the Denver Post, Kelly said, quote, their conversations and listening to music together rekindled her own teen spirit.
I love that so much.
This love of music is likely what first got her interested in Nick when the two met one another while in middle school. Nick always played the guitar, and the two became very close while playing music together. Nick's early life is less known, only that he was very close to his mother, Wendy. Once Nick and Stephanie became romantically involved before high school, they were madly in love. According to everyone who knew Nick, while he loved his family, music, and friends, he loved Stephanie most of all. However, they experienced their first tragedy after starting their freshman year at Columbine High School in the fall of 1998.
Now, I'm sure everyone listening to this show remembers Columbine, or maybe you actually don't remember it because it happened before you were born, but I'm sure most of you are pretty familiar with it. For the four of us who all lived in Colorado at the time, it's a deeply ingrained memory, even though we were all very young. Ian, you had to be like
I was 2.
so okay, so you
Yeah.
probably don't remember.
I don't remember. Again, like I was telling you guys before the recording, all I know about it was that my brother was born the day
Right.
after.
Right.
And my mom, that kind of was very bad for my mom.
Yeah.
Kinda
Oh,
freaked her out.
I can imagine. Yeah, it was just, God, I will never forget that day and just the weeks that followed and all the adults around me and trying to understand it. And then, it's just something that really like ingrained.
You would have been 6 years old.
Yeah. It's one of my first memories
Really?
because we had soccer practice that day. And I just remember all the adults were standing around just like, they just looked like zombies.
That's-
Everyone was so
huh.
freaked out.
I don't have any memory
Same.
of that.
Really?
No. And I don't know if I don't even know that I was living in Colorado at this time. I may have been.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot.
I may have been
You're probably in Oklahoma.
in Vegas still, or in Oklahoma possibly. Yeah, maybe Oklahoma. But yeah, or my parents just didn't tell me about it.
Your parents did shield you a lot from like
And
events.
my parents were teachers,
Mhm.
when this all went down. And honestly, I've never even asked them about this. I'm curious to see what they remember about it. But I'm sure for them, it would hit us, close to home, working in schools as teachers, and to have something as horrific as this happen was just shocked everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it really rocked the world because
Mhm.
nothing like this had happened before.
And it really made the name Littleton stand out to people. Like, people will hear Littleton, Colorado, and instantly, your mind goes to the shooting.
Yeah.
Just similar to the way that when you mention Aurora, Colorado, people think of the theater shooting, and we've had a lot of mass shootings here in Colorado. But
yeah, I have a cousin who graduated from, or two cousins graduated from Columbine.
mhm.
They weren't there during it, but they definitely, and I had actually visited Columbine years later when I was in high school. I played basketball at a tournament there, and I remember going into the school, and at that point I obviously knew what had happened. And I remember my cousin telling me that after this all happened, they did a huge, like, obvious gut job of the school, and like especially the library. They redid the whole library and everything. But I remember being in there because I think we had like a little meeting before our game started in the new library, and I remember just feeling very weird being there and thinking about what had happened. And because it's just, it's hard to believe that something like this ever happened, and it's unfortunate that it continues to happen. But yeah, we'll give you a little just quick overview in case you're not familiar with the events of April 20th, 1999.
Yeah, at around 11:15, students Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris planted propane bombs in the school's cafeteria to go off during the busiest lunch hour. However, after both bombs failed to detonate, the two students began their massacre around the school, killing 12 other fellow students and also one teacher before they themselves committed suicide at 12:08 p.m. The Columbine massacre would go down as one of the most well-known school shootings and would be the deadliest until Virginia Tech happened in 2007. So Nick and Stephanie were both in the school that day, but they were thankfully unharmed. Nick had been practicing his guitar on the other side of the school, and both they and everyone in Littleton, were extremely traumatized by the shooting. Stephanie's mother, Kelly, said, quote, "The Columbine thing has been hard on all these kids. They have gone through so much." Kelly told Stephanie to look towards the future and said that the Columbine shooting was, quote, "the worst there will be. There won't be any more." And Stephanie replied, quote, "Mom, there will be more." And sadly, she was right. But the shooting had made Stephanie and Nick even closer, and soon they were just inseparable. For the next year, the two of them would spend most days together and often sneak out to spend evenings with each other as well. And they wanted to be together for the rest of their lives. In January of 2000, Nick got his first job at a local Subway sandwich shop that was only less than a mile from Columbine High School. And most of Nick's coworkers were students and survivors of the shooting as well. And they would also hang out with him while he worked, even if they no longer worked at the location. And the Subway had become a local hangout for a lot of kids, though there were rumors that the students were doing more than just hanging out at the restaurant. For the next month, Stephanie would often sneak out while Nick closed the store so that they could hang out afterward. And that was the plan on the evening of February 13th, 2000, the day before Valentine's Day.
Sunday, February 13th started out as a typical day for Nick and Stephanie. Nick had only been working at the Subway location for a little over a month, but he still impressed the manager and owner, Joseph Hartman Jr., enough that he was given the task of closing the store on his own. This is an important distinction to make because, as Nick was only 15 at the time, he was protected by child labor laws that dictated he could not work more than 6 hours at a time, and he could not work past 9:30 p.m. on a school night, despite the fact that the Subway closed at 10 on Sundays. Still, Nick didn't mind. He enjoyed the extra cash he received from the closing shifts and hanging out with his friends, many of them from Columbine and other store employees. Many of these friends, especially those who had worked at Subway, entered the shop through the back door, though this practice would come under scrutiny later on. There had been a rumor that the Subway was being used as a safe spot to sell drugs to the high schoolers nearby, and they used the back door to avoid suspicion in case the restaurant had customers up front. However, this rumor was mainly spread by the Trinity Christian Center, which is only a few hundred yards from this Subway restaurant. According to Nick's close friend Nathan Grill, quote, "I don't think there's really a lot of drugs at the store. Once in a while you see a couple of kids smoking pot there, but not every day. I know Nick's not into drugs." Nathan had actually worked at the Subway for about 8 months, but had quit the same month that Nick had started. Still, he would often come by the shop with friends while Nick worked just to hang out and get some food.
And this had been the case on February 13th. Nathan had come by earlier in the night with a group of Nick's friends. And for the first few hours, they were, hanging out in the store and nothing of note happened. They were just talking about school and only being interrupted whenever a customer would come in, and then Nick would just make them a sandwich. And then around 9:30 p.m., a customer came into the shop and Nathan decided to head home since it was around closing time and it was a school night. They said their goodbyes and left, and soon it was just Nick and the customer in the store. It's important to note that while police likely questioned this customer, they have not been named. Meanwhile, Stephanie had spent the night at home with her mother, and her friends describe her as quiet, often only leaving her house to go to school or to hang out with Nick at work. Stephanie had dinner with her family that night, and sometime before 10, she returned to her room to work on algebra homework. And then shortly after this, her mother, Kelly, came up and said, quote, "Good night, I love you," thinking that Stephanie was going to sleep soon. Stephanie told her that she loved her too and said good night. However, a short time after Kelly fell asleep, Stephanie snuck out of the house and drove to the Subway. Again, while Kelly never knew that Stephanie would do this, she often left the house after Kelly went to sleep to hang out with Nick while he closed the shop. And it's unclear when Stephanie arrived at the Subway, but it would have been after Nathan left since he did not report seeing her there. Some outlets have reported that Nick let Stephanie in through the back door after closing, and this was, a usual practice for the employees at the store. However, when Stephanie arrived or how she came into the store cannot actually be confirmed.
The only thing that can be confirmed is that nobody heard from Stephanie or Nick for the next several hours. It's important to note that this was in 2000, and it's unknown if either Nick or Stephanie had cell phones. And like we mentioned earlier, Stephanie had said she hated technology. But Stephanie's mom had no idea that she was out, and nobody checked on them because they didn't think anything was wrong. However, at around 12:45 a.m. on February 14th, an unnamed Subway employee and fellow Columbine student was driving past the Subway and noticed that the lights had been left on. And they felt that this was strange, as they knew Nick was supposed to be closing the shop and he had already done it a handful of times in the month since he had started working there. So they're like, okay, this is odd. Is there an issue? What's going on here? Or did he just forget to turn the lights off? So they decided to pull into the parking lot of the Subway and parked in the back near the rear entrance. However, when they arrived, they observed a white man with blonde hair, about 5'8" tall, wearing a baseball cap and black jacket. The jacket either had a red lining to it or he wore a red shirt. The employee said the man appeared to be between 16 and 20 years old, and at first, they thought he was just a friend of Nick's who was hanging out while he closed the store. The unnamed employee walked into the restaurant from the back entrance and learned why the lights had been left on. Stephanie and Nick were lying behind the counter, shot to death. The following day, Kelly didn't immediately realize anything was wrong. As far as she was concerned, Stephanie was upstairs sleeping and would wake up soon enough for school. However, she soon realized that Stephanie had snuck out the previous night when she saw that her car wasn't parked in the driveway.
And the way that she found out that her daughter was one of the victims is just so horrific. She had turned on the local news and she saw that the top story had been about a double homicide. And as she's watching the coverage of the murder, she notices that Stephanie's car was parked in the lot next to Subway. And shortly after that, she received a call from the police and they told her that her daughter was one of the victims. And shortly after, local news crews and police descended on her house, and Kelly said, quote, "It was just awful. I can remember somebody saying, 'Is this the mother?' And you can't imagine. You're hoping there's somebody standing behind you, or that they're not really looking at you, or that you're dreaming." She said, quote, "I thought that we would have all the answers within the first day or two." And they, as we know, certainly did not. Now here's some local news that is reporting from February 14th, 2000.
Lan and Bertha, a couple of new items to report tonight. First of all, it is not clear how much help the Subway store's surveillance camera will be in this investigation. There's a question tonight as to whether there was actually a tape working properly inside that camera. Secondly, investigators are waiting on store officials to do an audit of the cash drawer in the shop. That will help determine whether, in fact, this was a robbery that went horribly wrong. Investigators are done for the evening, but they're expected back Tuesday to finish processing a crime scene that was first discovered by an off-duty store employee. At 12:45 a.m. Monday, she dialed 911.
She just happened to be driving by and saw the lights on very late and decided to stop and check on the employees inside there.
She found 2 bodies behind the store counter. Both victims had been shot. Authorities won't say if they found a weapon.
The female party called us on 911 and at the same time saw a young male leaving the area that we would like to talk to.
15-year-old Nicholas Kunselman was supposed to close the store. 16-year-old Stephanie Hart was there visiting him.
He'd always come in and he'd say hi and stuff. He was really nice and friendly. I mean, I just don't understand how this could happen.
Laid back, nice, just doing his job. I was hanging out with him last night, so like I said, and now he's dead. It's just crazy.
Crazy and incomprehensible to the mother of a Columbine student who died a mile away nearly a year ago.
I think what's interesting, and we bring this up later, but even in that clip, you can kind of see that all 3 of those guys they kind of sound like the suspect's description. Like they're all kind of dressed like that.
Mhm.
That's how a lot of kids like dress it during
That was
time.
the
It's just
style.
totally normal. Yeah.
Yeah. What definitely not out of the ordinary as much as it would be today.
Right.
This Subway's still there.
Yep.
Still open.
Is it?
Yep.
I don't know how many times it's sold since
Yeah.
this situation, but yeah, you can still get a sandwich.
Wow. Parents out there, you know how hard it can be to fill the gaps in your child's diet to provide full body nourishment that kids need with a yummy taste that they'll love. But you can do that with Hiya. Now, let me tell you why Hiya is so much better than other children's vitamins on the market. Basically, a lot of those vitamins are candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy additives that growing kids should just never eat. That's why Hiya created a super-powered chewable vitamin. While many children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar, which is known to contribute to a variety of health issues, Hiya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy additives. Yet it tastes great and is perfect for picky eaters. Our daughter loves them, and they also send a little pack of stickers so they can decorate the bottle, and it makes them much more excited to take their vitamins, so we love that. It's formulated with the help of pediatricians and nutritional experts. It's pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, vitamin B12, C, zinc, folate, and many others to help support the immune system, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, and more. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else you can imagine. Every single batch is third-party tested for heavy metals and microbiomes in a qualified GMP-compliant lab using scientifically validated testing methods so that you know the product is safe and nutritious. It's designed for kids 2 and up and sent straight to your door so parents have one less thing to worry about. And we've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/milehigher. This deal is not available on their regular website. Just go to hiyahealth.com/milehigher and get your kids the full body nourishment that they need to grow into healthy adults. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Department immediately investigated the scene and turned up over 150 pieces of evidence from inside the restaurant. They were also looking to get CCTV footage from the night before, as a camera actually captured the area behind the counter where Nick and Stephanie's bodies were found. Now, while authorities have never released the autopsies of Stephanie and Nick, it is known that they were both shot several times, execution style, just absolutely horrific. And police did rule out robbery almost immediately because the register only carries around $50 at the time, and large bills were brought to a safe every 2 hours, and it's a safe that only the manager can access with a key that they kept on them at all times.
Which makes sense. I mean, how much cash is a Subway restaurant going to be carrying? You know, it's not going to be a whole lot. So not a lot of motivation for a ton of money. Again, not saying that people won't kill for $50. It definitely happens.
And sometimes it happens just because people aren't aware
Yeah.
of how it works at restaurants like a Subway.
But it's interesting the details released are execution style. And, you know, that's very specific. So it sounds like a targeted attack.
Sounds personal.
Like they went there to kill them. And that was the intention. Like we mentioned earlier, the investigators said they collected over 150 pieces of evidence from the Subway restaurant. However, they have not released what these pieces of evidence could be. They've been very tight-lipped about this even to this day. So we don't even know what that includes. Is that DNA evidence? We can assume they did the standard forensic protocol for 2000, sweeping for fingerprints, probably took samples of blood and things like that. I'm sure they have some DNA evidence, but we don't really know. We don't know what they actually got. And because it's a fairly popular location, it's possible some of this evidence that was collected could have just been from other employees. It could have been from patrons of the restaurant. It's just really unclear. Investigators also ruled out the possibility that this was a crime of opportunity. They assumed that since the individual likely entered through the back entrance, they were at least known by Nick and Stephanie, if not friendly with them. And what about the individual the unnamed coworker saw when they pulled up in the subway parking lot? Well, unfortunately, this person was never identified. The problem is that the description generally matched many Columbine students and teenagers during the early 2000s. Following the witness's description of the suspect, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office created 2 composite sketches of the potential suspect. They released this official description: a white male between 16 and 20 years old, 5'7" to 5'8" tall, weighing 150 to 170 pounds, clean shaven with blondish hair. He wore blue jeans, tennis shoes, a black ball cap, and a black coat with red lining or a red shirt underneath. When the suspect's description in this composite was put out to the public, this caused people all across the country to call in from as far away as South Carolina and Florida, saying the description looked like someone they know.
Even Nathan Grill himself said that he looked a lot like the description that the coworker provided, and even had been wearing a similar outfit the night that Nick and Stephanie were killed. And it's important to note that Nathan was interrogated at least 3 times separately by the Jeffco Sheriff's Department and has been completely cleared of any suspicion. So what about the security camera? I'm sure you guys are all wondering. Well, unfortunately, like most of the cases we cover, it feels, the security camera hadn't recorded anything the night that Stephanie and Nick were killed. However, it's a little different in this situation because it wasn't broken and the footage hadn't been re-recorded over or anything like that. It had simply just been turned off by the owner or an employee potentially as well. How could this be? Well, the police haven't released their official finding on the matter. Still, it's theorized that either the employees or the owner, Joseph Hartman Jr., turned off the camera when potentially illegal activities were done inside of the store, including drug deals, which, like we mentioned earlier, had long been rumored about this specific Subway location. And while there wasn't any proof surrounding the drug deals at the restaurant at this point in time, it seemed like Joseph had allowed employees to turn off the cameras. And even if Joseph hadn't been involved in any illegal activity, he allowed it to happen by turning off the cameras in the shop when illegal activity occurred. So police began investigating this potential drug-related crime theory. And friends and family did not believe that Nick and Stephanie were involved in any drug-related activity. But investigators believe that if the assailant came to the Subway looking to steal or sell drugs, Nick and Stephanie may have just gotten in the way.
To investigate this theory, they tapped the phones at the Subway location and began monitoring those entering through the store's back entrance. Joseph would have been liable for their deaths as he had created an unsafe environment and allowed drug dealing on his property. Her lawsuit also stated that he had violated the Youth Act by allowing Nick to work more than 6 hours past 9:30 p.m. on a school night. However, the lawsuit was thrown out in 2001 as the court decided that Stephanie was not an invitee and the drug dealing aspect was only a rumor. According to the law, an invitee of a business such as Subway is someone who enters the premises intending to do business with the establishment. Since Stephanie likely entered the shop after hours and was unknown to Joseph, she did not classify as an invitee, and the business was not liable for her standard of care. On top of that, Kelly could not seek damages for violating child labor laws, as Stephanie was not an employee of the restaurant, even though she wouldn't have been there if Nick had been forced to work a closing shift on his own. Nick's parents could have sought damages, however, they had been receiving workman's compensation from Subway following his death and didn't want to jeopardize that in order to, just in case this lawsuit wasn't successful.
Makes total sense to me.
Well, especially when Kelly's lawsuit is immediately thrown out.
Right.
It didn't even last a couple weeks in court.
They're getting something at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's like they're already dealing with so much emotionally, and I can see just not wanting to go down that road.
This episode is brought to you by acorns. Did you know that squirrels are nature's greatest investors? Well, squirrels spend a huge chunk of their lives stashing away their acorns. In fact, one squirrel can store over 10,000 nuts each year. Bet you didn't know that. They save so many acorns, and they have zero idea where most of them are. Losing track of your assets isn't the best financial strategy, but this next part is pretty great. Those acorns the squirrel totally forgets about, some of those grow into oak trees, and those oak trees grow more acorns. And bam, just like that, the squirrel looks like a complete genius. And that's why we love squirrels. They're living proof that anyone can be an investor. They just have to give their acorns a chance to grow. Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future. And you don't need to be an expert. I mean, investing is intimidating for anybody, but Acorns makes it very easy to start investing today. They'll recommend a diversified portfolio that will match you and your money goals. And you don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now. Even if all you've got is just some spare change, it's better than nothing. You don't need a ton of time to do this either. You can create your Acorns account in as little as just 5 minutes. It really is one of the simplest investing apps out there, and I love that they put an emphasis on investing your spare change because that's something that all of us can do. What's great is that with Acorns, if you start investing your spare change, you may be able to compound that over time and eventually grow that large oak tree just like the squirrel. Diversified portfolio recommendations, and also they have tons of education on their app so that you can learn how to be a better investor as time goes on. So sign up now and join over 13 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/milehigher or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/milehigher.
However, following the investigation, Joseph Hartman Jr. was fined $19,000 for violating child labor laws. And I'm sure that felt like a huge win for their families. And then 2001 would actually only get worse for Kelly and the Grizzell family. On October 28th, 2001, which would have been Stephanie's 18th birthday, she was arrested. Kelly had been driving home on the evening of October 27th when she saw 3 unmarked deputy patrol cars making a traffic stop. Deputy James Lucas had pulled over Lance Kirkland over a busted headlight, and both Deputy James Lucas and Lance were survivors of the Columbine massacre. Kelly said that she was feeling frustrated that night. It was the eve of her daughter's birthday, and it seemed like no progress had been made in the case. At this moment, she felt like the deputies were wasting resources by pulling over high schoolers for minor offenses. Kelly spoke about the interaction, saying, quote, "I wanted to know why it took 6 of them to pull over a car. It seemed like overkill. Yet they had 19 calls to that subway before my daughter was murdered, and they never did anything about it." According to Lance, Kelly went up to Deputy Lucas and said, quote, "You're harassing my daughter's friends and not doing enough to solve her murder."
Lance, who is out of his car receiving a ticket from another deputy, said that Kelly only tapped Deputy Lucas on the shoulder to get his attention. However, Deputy Lucas wrote in his report that Kelly punched him in the stomach. Despite 6 other deputies on the scene, a cadet in training was the only one who corroborated Lucas's version of events. Lance said that Kelly, quote, "was pretty much bitching up the cop. He was trying to ignore her. He smirked and turned his back on her in the middle of a sentence. Kelly brushed her fingers against his right shoulder, and he turned around and freaked out. He said she struck him, but she barely touched him." Well, whatever the contact was, it wasn't serious enough for Kelly to be arrested on the spot, but police eventually went to Kelly's house, and when her husband told them she wasn't home, they searched the premises anyway. They then called a relative's home that Kelly went to after the interaction and told her to report to the jail in Golden, which is a smaller town about 30 miles northwest of Littleton, and like turn yourself in, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So Kelly arrived at the jail at around 3 a.m. and she said that she was mistreated while in the holding cell, but Internal Affairs exonerated the deputy involved and said that Kelly had called him a, quote, "fat fuck," which not a crime.
No.
You can say whatever you want. Freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffco officials said that they handled the case with, quote, "tact and integrity." For Kelly, the, quote, "ordeal damaged her ability to cooperate with the sheriff's office in the investigation of her daughter's murder." Yeah, it's a very unfortunate situation that played out. And it's really hard to blame Kelly for being frustrated.
Yeah, I don't blame her at all.
Your daughter's murder seemingly going nowhere. You're not getting updates. They're not making any progress. And then you see them wasting time, a bunch of deputies pulling over a kid essentially for a busted tail or a busted headlight.
Yeah,
and you're like, what are you guys doing? Why aren't you out looking for the murderer?
Yeah, I think it would be hard to judge her in that moment unless you yourself have experienced that type of loss without any answers. You know, like I would just be beside myself, and I could see myself doing something like that.
And like, especially at this time, I'd probably say this wasn't like a high crime area. I mean, there's not a lot of violent crime or murders happening.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd think there'd be tons of resources. And again, patrol deputies aren't necessarily going to be spending their shifts like trying to find the killer, but I can just understand, just in the spur of the moment, she's frustrated. She sees, you know, this kid in her eyes kind of being harassed on the side of the road, and she just kind of snaps. But I highly doubt she punched this deputy in the stomach.
And if that were really the case, the other, what would it be, 4 other officers who were there would have...
Well, they would have arrested her on the spot.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's
Come on.
assault.
The fact that they didn't is very telling to me.
Mm-hmm.
That whatever happened was not what they said it was.
No, she had an attitude with them and tapped him on the shoulder in a way that he didn't like. And, you know, it would have been nice for them to have some empathy for her situation and just let that go. It's not a big deal, but...
I also think this whole situation speaks to like 2 unique things about this case, which is, one, like as we've mentioned, all of the young people that we've talked about so far were survivors of Columbine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and this is only a few years later. So there is like that memory, the trauma really is still like extremely fresh for everyone involved here. And tensions are just high across the board.
You know, it was a very tumultuous time following Columbine. And, you know, there's a lot of people who were on both sides of it that felt like law enforcement did everything they could. And then there's a lot of people that felt like they didn't. And so, you know, I understand that there was a lot of animosity directed to law enforcement at this time. But yeah, and just, I think it's frustrating for all of us, you know, especially if, you know, sometimes you get pulled over for simple stuff and you're like, we all have that excuse, like, don't you have anything better to do? Like there's unsolved crimes, there's disappearances, there's murders, there's, you know, all sorts of things going on. And, you know, when cops are, especially when you see multiple cops being pulled in for a simple routine traffic stop, it can be frustrating, you know, as a citizen to be like, you know, I mean, I watch a lot of cop interactions and, you know, First Amendment auditors and things like that. And it's very interesting because, you know, there's both sides to it and I see both sides of it, but I get the frustration. I mean, you had personal experiences with it. I don't know if you've ever talked about it before on the show.
Oh, I'm sure I've talked about it on the internet at some point. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think I made a whole video on it at one point, but yeah, I got my license suspended senior year of high school. You were with me with the final one and you knew the officer too.
I was
you were like
riding along with the officer who pulled you over.
Not at the time. You were riding with me.
Oh, no, that's right. I was riding with you, but I knew
It
the
would have been
officer.
funny if you were in.
Yeah.
No,
I knew the officer though, because I had ridden with him before.
That was the final one. And every single time it was for like a California stop, like just not stopping fully in a neighborhood, which, you know.
They're trying to keep the neighborhood safe and, you know, kids run out and, you know, they don't want anybody to get hit.
But I feel like I was definitely targeted too because I had like, you know, bumper stickers all over my car and I clearly was a teenager rolling around. But yeah, I was pretty annoyed to lose my license. My parents were pissed, but
it's a shared frustration among everybody, right? Everybody, if you get pulled over and you feel like it was unjust or you're like, really, you know, I wasn't, you know.
Especially when there's so many unsolved cases and violence happening in your area, which is pretty much everywhere in this country nowadays.
At this point in time, it really seems like the investigation into Nick and Stephanie's murders is leading nowhere. But an investigation into the alleged drug dealing at the Subway location spawned a massive drug probe.
The DEA's Denver office tapped the Subway's phones and monitored the location for the next year, recording thousands of hours of phone calls regarding potential drug deals and illegal activity. In late 2001, 35 people were arrested and prosecuted in relation to the drug probe, and most of the defendants brought in were accused of selling cocaine and methamphetamine, and they were selling primarily to people in their teens or early 20s. And so now, with the drug activity proven to be a major operation out of that Subway location, Kelly filed an appeal for her civil suit. In response to this motion, the presiding judge agreed with Kelly, saying, quote, "Owner negligently operated the premises by permitting and ratifying ongoing criminal activity, including transaction for the sale, distribution, and possession of illegal drugs and substances, including marijuana, but it's employees who would routinely meet in the back room near the rear exit door for the purpose of distributing and possessing illegal intoxicating drugs and controlled substances. Employees and non-employees routinely entered the premises via the rear door when they intended to partake in the above illegal activities. However, since Stephanie was not an invitee or a customer and was instead just a guest of Nick's, Joseph Hartman was not liable to pay her damages under a civil suit. This could bolster a case by Nick's parents, but again, they never filed a suit fearing that it would jeopardize that workman's comp. And what's more is none of the 35 arrests from the drug probe yielded a suspect in the murder investigation. DEA agent Dan Moore said that it helped rule out potential suspects in the case, but no further leads were presented.
That's honestly crazy.
I know.
Out of 35 arrests and investigating this location as heavily as they did,
You would think there'd have to be a connection. It's probably
So-
shocking to their families.
it makes you wonder, was this even drug motivated?
Mm-hmm.
Joseph Hartman Jr., the owner, sold the store in October 2001, and the new owners completely remodeled it. By February 2002, none of the employees who had worked at the store with Nick remained. One of those employees was a young woman named Brandy Jo Mallinson. Brandy Jo is the same age as Nick and Stephanie and was also present at Columbine on the day of the massacre. It has also been alleged that she was the one who discovered their bodies and saw the suspect leave the store, but this is unconfirmed. Brandy Jo's mother, Linda, said, quote, "All these horrible tragedies devastated her." On the third anniversary of the Columbine shootings in 2002, Brandy Jo was arrested for theft and charged with a misdemeanor. However, she graduated 2 months later and became a certified nurse's assistant caring for elderly people. Linda said she had started working an additional job, attending Parks College in nearby Thornton, Colorado, and always paid her bills on time. Linda said that she was a very responsible girl. However, while attending Parks College, a friend introduced Brandy Jo to meth, promising her that it would help her lose weight and feel better after she had been dealing with the trauma of her high school years. Her father, Richard, said, quote, "All that hurt had a big impact on her." After being introduced to meth, Brandy Jo began acting erratically and would disappear for months at a time. When her parents learned that she had become involved with drugs, they had an intervention and enrolled her in some counseling.
And then in 2005, Brandy Jo declared personal bankruptcy, and a year later, she was convicted of drug possession and identity theft charges. She was sentenced to probation and stayed with her parents. Her mother said, quote, "She told us she really wanted to get off drugs and take care of herself. She was just so sad. It hurt so bad to see her like this." Can't even imagine. Then on December 26, 2006, Brandy told her dad that she was going to her friend's house and she didn't return home for several days. But her parents weren't really alarmed because she had done this in the past. They were only worried about her parole requirements. Then a month later, a stranger called the house and said that somebody had killed Brandy Jo and put her body in the Platte River. At that point, the Mallinsons went ahead and filed a missing persons report, and the police began contacting the various phone numbers that Brandy Jo had written down in her room. Several different theories came out during the investigation, and one explanation was maybe she had overdosed. Her body was dumped in an unknown lake, and another person said that she was murdered and that her body was hidden in the mountains. However, none of these leads led to any concrete evidence, and as of December of 2024, Brandy Jo has been missing for 18 years. And if she was the one who discovered Nick and Stephanie's bodies, she was the only one who saw the potential killer. And what's even more surprising is that only 2 years after Nick and Stephanie were murdered in 2000, another similar workplace murder took place in Littleton. On January 27th, 2002, James Springer, Robert Zajac, and Aaron Gala were shot to death inside of the AMF bowling alley in Littleton. Police believe that in this case, the shooter was connected to the previous attempted robbery and was at the AMF to do the same. However, this case is also unsolved to this day.
Unfortunately, that's just about all the information the authorities have released in connection to Stephanie and Nick's murders. As previously mentioned, because they are connected to the Columbine massacre, hundreds of people confessed to the murders in an attempt to gain notoriety. While investigators have over 40 binders of evidence related to Nick and Stephanie's case, for some reason, they do not want to release that evidence to the public because they don't want to ruin the chance of possessing guilt knowledge. Which means information that only the perpetrator would know, which I get to a certain extent, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
And maybe we need a little bit more to try to drum up some more legitimate leads.
Mm-hmm.
However, because the crime occurred in the early morning hours of February 14th, there are very few people to interview about what could have happened before the crime. I mean, it's early in the morning.
Yeah.
This area is pretty quiet that time of night.
Mm-hmm.
Elias Alberti, a cold case homicide detective with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, said, quote, "That evidence has been sent out to multiple labs around the country and around the world, and we've come up with no solid leads in the case." Alberti said that after sending all of the DNA evidence, including fingerprints from the shop, they received absolutely no new leads to work off of. Sergeant Wayne Holverson, who worked on the case from 2004 to 2007, said, quote, "We've spoken to friends, family, and customers from that day, and just no one knows anything or has come forward yet to say anything." He said that it's frustrating to see the evidence and casework done on their murders and realize that it has led investigators nowhere. And here's a clip of Elias Alberti describing how they still receive tips and confessions in the case 20 years later.
Investigators say they've continued to chase down those tips, some even coming in as recent as this week. Over the years, several people have even falsely confessed to the crime.
I don't know the exact motive to what made this person or persons enter into this subway and murder Stephanie and Nick. That's something that we're definitely always looking at and trying to figure out.
Still wondering what happened on Valentine's Day 20 years ago, and hoping this new $12,000 reward could bring some long-awaited answers.
A lot of people remember this case. And a lot of people that remember, the reason they remember this case is because a lot of people were teenagers. They were classmates.
Liz Gilardi, Denver 7.
Just kind of a interesting tidbit here. Someone actually in my family went to Columbine High School during the time that Nick and Stephanie did. They were actually in the same grade as them.
Mm-hmm. And there when the shooting happened as well.
Yeah, she was, the person in my family was in the cafeteria, I believe, and then ended up running out of the school when they told her not to. But yeah, I was texting her yesterday because I was just wondering if, she had any, if she remembered Nick and Stephanie, and she says that she does, but she didn't know them very well, and she was surprised to hear that this has never been solved.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty shocking.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy.
Did you know every 26 seconds, a burglary takes place in the United States, according to FBI data? That means by the time this podcast ends, dozens of homes will have been targeted. Protect your home before it's too late with SimpliSafe's proactive security system. SimpliSafe helps to stop threats before they even have a chance to break in. We love SimpliSafe here. We're big fans. There's a lot of reasons why I'm a big fan of it. I think the number one thing about SimpliSafe that makes it truly unique in a lot of ways is it's DIY friendly, which means that you can install the system yourself. It really is that simple. They have these little sticky strips for all the sensors. The cameras are all really easy to get hooked up to your Wi-Fi. But the best part of it is it's fully customizable. So you can customize it to whatever home size you have. I mean, even apartments can benefit from a SimpliSafe system. And what's also cool is that traditional security systems only take action after someone has already broken in. That is too late at that point. SimpliSafe's Active Guard outdoor protection can help prevent break-ins before they happen. SimpliSafe is utilizing AI-powered cameras backed by live professional monitoring agents to monitor your property and detect suspicious activity. So if someone's lurking around, scoping out the joint, trying to see how they're going to get inside, well, it's going to be pretty tough because they're going to be doing battle with the cameras and the live professional monitoring agents because they're going to activate spotlights. They're going to start talking to this potential intruder. And the goal is to hopefully scare them away before they ever make entry into your property. And they can even contact the police if it's needed. Plus, there's no long-term contracts or cancellation fees, and monitoring plans start affordably at around just $1 a day. You really can't put a price on peace of mind, security, and safety these days. And at just $1 a day, you're not going to find a better deal anywhere. Plus, there's a 60-day satisfaction guarantee or your money back, and it's been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. News & World Report 5 years in a row. So many reasons to give SimpliSafe a try today. Visit simplisafe.com/milehigher to claim 50% off a new system with a professional monitoring plan and your first month free. That's simplisafe.com/milehigher because there's no safe like SimpliSafe.
So let's go over potential theories. Obviously, we've already brought up the idea of an attempted robbery, and police have ruled that theory out. However, it's still worth considering. As I said earlier, it's common knowledge now that chains like Subway and, similar stores change out larger bills consistently and only keep small amounts in the register at a time, it's possible that an assailant didn't know that information at the time, or also was just young and inexperienced, especially when you think of the description.
Yeah, just may not have known that.
Mm-hmm. So if the attempted robber was a student at Columbine, which is likely because the witness described the suspect as a teenager between 16 and 20, Nick and Stephanie could have recognized them from school, and the suspect murdered them as a way to conceal their identity. It seems like could be a possibility. To me, it doesn't stand out as the most likely.
Well, I'm just like, a lot of times in robberies, not always, but perpetrators cover their face. They wear some type of face covering.
Right.
Usually. But again, if it was an inexperienced person, this was just kind of a spur of the moment thing. But again, it's like late at night. It seems you'd have to drive over to this Subway restaurant, and like he'd have to know that Nick was still there. Like the timing of it, because robberies occur usually right when the store opens, or unless this person followed them there. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just the timing's very weird to me for this to be some type of robbery.
Well, you do also have to consider, just a small note there, that we don't know that the person who was seen there by the witness actually was the one who committed the murders. And so it could have been someone wearing a mask that nobody saw, but
could have been another person alongside this one person that was seen that just completely left the scene before ever being seen by a single person. So yeah, it's possible.
I also think something that kind of complicates it is if we're to believe the description of Stephanie and Nick being shot execution style, that doesn't really fit the MO, of a robbery gone wrong. Normally in that case, it's kind of like a spur of the moment decision to kill.
Right.
As opposed to if they were shot execution style, it would have been to a certain degree premeditated.
Yeah. It seems like that would be personal. Also, you got to think about the statistics of robberies. Out of the over 1 million robberies that take place every year, only 2,000 result in a murder. And that number drops considerably when an additional victim is present. So, you got to consider that as well.
And that's also, that number, I believe, is including like home robberies. Like, that's not just fast food situation.
Right.
Yeah.
This is interesting. In 2017, 29 food industry employees were murdered while on the job. And this was an increase from all previous years and was mainly the result of spillover violence from gang activity and domestic disputes. Some of the shootings were also disgruntled employees, and some of them were mass shootings. But the idea of a disgruntled employee in this situation has been ruled out because police have thoroughly investigated everyone employed at that Subway. So then it makes you go back to drug activity. Maybe that could make sense.
Yeah, there's a good chance this was a drug-related crime. I mean, since the suspect was likely a teenager based on the description, and most of the people involved in the drug deals at the location were teens or people in their early 20s, maybe they were there just looking to rob drugs off of Nick and Stephanie or shake them down for money that they owed. But again, as far as we know, neither of them were involved in the drug activity at the Subway. Maybe this person got angry and just killed them as a threat to everybody else involved with the drug deals at this location, which possible, but it seems, I don't know, it seems kind of out there. I mean,
so extreme. Yeah.
2 young teens. I don't know, like clearly a couple there. I don't know. It's difficult based on the DEA investigation and the fact that they made 35 arrests, but like by all accounts, as far as we know, not involved in any of it. So wrong place, wrong time, or maybe this person thought somebody else was going to be there. Didn't expect somebody as young as Nick being there to close the store, and anticipated somebody older, knowing that it was later in the evening. But it's like, why? And maybe people murder people over nothing.
Yeah,
so it's
true.
not beyond possibility, but
it's just hard to wrap your mind around why anyone would kill the 2 of them the way that they did. Like, your mind obviously goes to attempted robbery, and obviously we've been over all the factors there and everything, but the execution style, it really changes everything.
It does. Ah, man, I can't ignore how close this was to the Columbine murders. And and we'll talk about maybe this was a copycat killer theory here in a second. But let's talk about Brandy Joe's murder for a sec, because this can potentially tie into the drug-related crime theory. So if Brandy Joe had been the Subway employee who discovered Nick and Stephanie, there's a chance that she knew more about the murders or who had done them, what had happened, why. So there's a chance that when she became involved with meth while attending college, she may have come in contact with the man who committed the murders. And once she recognized the individual, this person could have killed her in order to further conceal his identity, which makes some sense. Because again, it's very weird that Brandy Joe also goes missing. But again, there's no way to, officially tie these together. But
yeah, to me,
it's all very weird.
It feels like a stretch. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of other factors when it comes to Brandy Joe to consider.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough. And then there's a theory that Nick found out what was going on at the Subway with all the drug dealing and was potentially going to report the Subway to the authorities. And maybe, drug dealers or somebody involved. And this seems, if the DA is involved, I assume this is a fairly organized group that is operating out of here. It seems like maybe a step above just your, classic neighborhood drug dealer. This seems like 35 individuals.
Yeah.
There is a
Like
full ring, drug trafficking ring kind of going on here. And they're utilizing the Subway as pickup and drop zone. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
For me, that's the theory that makes the most sense. And it's hard because there's not a lot of evidence to support that. Just thinking about it, I could see it, especially with the style. It's like very clear the person who came in with the intention for them to be dead.
And Stephanie, just because she happened to be there with Nick,
right,
what just became a victim by default because she was there, which
it seems that way.
I think there's a lot of, if you look at all the circumstances, it really does seem to be something along those lines. But again, they arrested 35 people and they weren't able to drum up any further leads or.
That's the real difficult part of that one. Unless something was missed,
Or they have something and we just don't know. Again, we don't know what the investigators have in those 40 binders. There's got to be some more info that they're just needing another link to potentially go after somebody, but they're saying that they didn't come up with anything.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
For all 35.
If it was rumored and there were other people who were trying to report on the Subway, why didn't anything happen to them? Why just Nick and Stephanie? Potentially it's because they knew they could get them alone. But I still think if the people involved in the drug ring were willing to kill Nick and Stephanie for reporting it, why wouldn't they kill those 19 callers?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Unless there's a piece missing here, something that Nick specifically knew, or there was rumors that he was threatening to do something or report something. I don't know, but yeah, that definitely, it's hard because none of the theories to me, really, really make the most sense. There's something in each one of these that just makes you go, I don't know. Even
with the Columbine copycat killer theory, that this was, somebody who was inspired by the events of Columbine and just took it, wanted to murder somebody, and they took this opportunity to do it.
And people, brought up the fact that the suspect was seen wearing like a long trench coat, but that was also just kind of a popular style back then.
Seems like what everybody was wearing. So
it was also February.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like middle of winter, and
right.
I don't think that's out of the ordinary.
But this is an interesting statistic that ties into this. So according to data scientist Sherry Towers, who examined the likelihood of copycats following mass shootings were only temporarily contagious. They increased the probability of future shootings to only 13 days after the initial attacks. And that's somebody who's really, dived into the data. So 10 months later is a big difference between 13 days after.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? Yes. But according to the data, it seems less likely.
It does not seem likely to me at all. It really doesn't make any sense. If someone was truly inspired by Columbine and wanted to do something like that, why would they go to a Subway after it closed with 2 people inside? It just, I don't know. That one doesn't sit with me at all. What do you guys think?
I don't know. I think For me, the most likely one, even though police immediately ruled it out, is attempted robbery, just because in the case of like the AMF bowling lanes, right, another unsolved murder from around this time, I don't believe that AMF carries any more change in the register,
Right.
and yet they believe that that one was an attempted robbery.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the difference. Maybe it was the execution style.
That's what I keep coming back to.
Right. But that's if the like the assailant was a teenager who knew Nick and Stephanie from Columbine, didn't wear a mask because they're young and inexperienced, and they recognized one another, and they were like, "Oh shit, I gotta do something about this," you know. But because there's just no evidence, I do kind of go to the Columbine copycat, even though, like, yes, a Columbine copycat killer probably would want to do the most damage possible. Just looking at, like, again, everyone we've brought up in this case so far, like, was a survivor except for the parents. Like,
Yeah.
they all survived that, and it's like,
It's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just there's this air about the case of everyone being severely impacted by Columbine. So I don't know.
I don't put it out of the realm of possibility just based on what was going on in this time period. And we don't know, did this person know Dylan and Eric? Like we don't know anything.
Yeah.
So it's possible that this person was like, well, I'm going to do this to just see how it goes before I do something else, or you never know. I mean, there's infinite possibilities here. So I don't think it's out of the realm, because I'd like to think that this DEA probe was pretty in depth. You know, these are federal law enforcement officers that are conducting this, and they're going to, unless they just miss things or didn't ask the right questions. I mean, again, we don't know, but it seems like it was pretty thorough, and they would have figured it out. This was at the location of the murders.
Yeah.
They tapped phones. They tracked people going in and out. So you would think that if it was an individual involved with the drug operation going on here, that they would have figured it out. There would have been something there. But to me, this seems very random and very just like out of nowhere. And
see, to me, it feels the opposite. It feels like it was very much premeditated, and the person went in there with the plan to kill.
Right, which is
at least Nick.
Yeah, and I mean, random in the sense of nobody would have seen it coming, because it was somebody who was plotting this behind the scenes, and they took the opportunity to go and do this because it was late. Nobody else was around, and they knew they had a good chance of getting away with it.
Well, and it makes me think that whoever did this was planning it and was paying attention to kind of his routine and knew that he was closing this day, you know, therefore he's going to be by himself. Or maybe they knew his routine so much that they knew that Stephanie was going to be there and it was just going to be the two of them, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then when your mind really wanders, you know, here we are thinking like it was probably Nick was the main target. But then if you think about it, there could have been some type of altercation that happened at school that no one knew about, or some type of enemy that both of them had, or one or the other.
Or if somehow one of them knew something that they weren't supposed to know. And, you know, whoever did this figured, well, the two of them are so close. I got to
take them both out. And they knew that Stephanie, you know, would come most nights. I don't know. What theory makes the most sense to you?
I don't know. I really don't. I can't pick one, to be honest. I keep going back and forth, like you said.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think this, but then I'm like, well, X, Y, and Z wouldn't make sense. And
yeah, there's so many things that come up.
I don't really think it was the copycat theory, just because how is that really a copycat of someone? It's, okay, they went to Columbine, but that's
they're wearing a trench coat.
Pretty much, right. Other than that, though, like,
there's really no similarity.
They were at a restaurant. This has nothing to do with the school, besides the fact that they were students.
Yeah, but it could just be somebody who was following in the footsteps of Dylan and Eric and their philosophies, and was kind of inspired by not necessarily carrying out the acts in the exact same way that they did. Maybe it was something this person was planning for later on, but they wanted to just, you know, try it out.
Like,
you know what I mean?
Experience.
Yeah, like just see what it's like to do it. Yeah, it's very disturbing to even say that, but it happens.
Yeah. I mean,
Makes
it could
sense.
be.
I don't know. I'm like, how did they not get anything? So this guy came in, he does this, and there's just, they were clearly, they planned it well enough that they didn't leave any, really good, tangible evidence,
As far as
at
we
the
know.
scene, as far as we know.
And that's what's so annoying. It's like we really don't know at the end of the day what they have.
No.
For all we know, they could have something that would blow this whole thing wide open and put tons of other theories out there, and we just don't know about it.
Things would start clicking and making sense. Yeah, I don't know. To me, what seems most likely is that Nick knew something and that someone wanted to take him out. But I don't know. What do I really know? One thing that's just incredibly frustrating to me is that Joseph Hartman wasn't held accountable more than just his, violation of the child labor laws. And yeah, $19,000 is a huge fine. But the fact that those cameras were off is truly his responsibility. And in a lot of ways, you can argue, I think you can fully argue that these murders are not solved to this day because of his actions.
Yeah, I don't think you can dispute that. Had his security cameras been running, we might actually have images of the killer.
And it's so different than it just the equipment failing or running out of space or re-recording over or whatever. There's always those excuses where you have like a little more understanding for the owner of the establishment. But in a case where he is purposely turning it off for illegal activity to occur, it's just like, I don't understand how there was no additional accountability.
But that
on
makes
him.
me think that whoever did this, again, this was planned out. They knew they were kind of stalking the store before, because you would think that if this was just a random thing, they wouldn't take the chance of doing that when there's security cameras in a restaurant.
That's a great point. Could it have been someone who, well, I know everyone that worked there was, thoroughly investigated.
But
as
could
far
it
as we
be
know,
a repeat customer, someone that was going in?
But how do they know the camera's off?
Who knows?
Like,
People, I don't know. Maybe they somehow were able to talk to Joseph for a sec.
Or maybe it has like a red light,
or
and
maybe
they can see.
Yeah, or maybe they were like, they could have been like, hey man, I left my wallet here. Can you go check the cameras and see if anyone took it? Or can you check if I left it here? I can't find my wallet. And they're like,
bunch
no,
of ways.
I don't know. But I think that if you really wanted to scout out this place and figure out exactly who's there, when they're there, and the best way to go about doing something without being caught, it wouldn't be that hard.
Well, the more we discuss all of that, it seems very obvious that this was premeditated.
I believe so, yeah.
And so to me, that just rules out the idea of a copycat killer. But I'm curious.
Especially the way that they were executed.
Ian, what do you think?
I don't know. I think the thing that lends credence to this as well is if with like the unnamed witness saw the individual leave through the back entrance, it's likely that they were let in from the back entrance by Nick or Stephanie. Therefore, they probably did know them.
About that. Yeah.
Again, I still just kind of lean towards the Columbine copycat, only because there's not enough solid evidence to point to anything else, and because that's more of like a concept rather than it is a robbery or drug related activity.
Yeah.
It's easier to latch on to. And I think that's why I'm more inclined to think that way.
I see your point. I think you can really make an argument for and against all of these theories. But God, how unfortunate to not have any answers to this day. It's just devastating. I cannot imagine being these parents and having absolutely no answers. I would just horrific. Nick Kunselman and Stephanie Hart-Grizzell were buried together at the Mount Lindo Cemetery in Morrison. Their graves read, quote, "We will always keep you in our thoughts. We will remember how you opened our minds and showed us a more spiritual way of living." Every year, their families visit their graves together on Valentine's Day to spend time with one another and remember the young couple. Now, Valentine's Day is a couple days after this episode goes up, so, just keep their family in your thoughts.
Somebody else took them away from you. I think that's the hardest thing.
Friends took comfort in each other and supporting Stephanie's mom. They're so close now, they consider each other family.
Kelly, would you like to go first?
No, that's why every Valentine's Day they make the drive, no matter the weather, to the top of this mountain. Stephanie and Nick's final resting place, a place of peace.
You just go on for the hope that you're fighting for her to get the justice. And it would just mean the world if we could, after all these years, get some justice.
We also wanted to reach out to Kelly Grizzell and Nick Kunselman's family members and encourage them to apply for a HOPE grant through our foundation, Higher Hope. We would happily supply a one-time financial grant through the Higher Hope Foundation for investigation efforts, reward funds, or private DNA testing. So if anyone involved with their family sees this episode, we would love for you to let them know and encourage them to apply at higherhope.org. Jefferson County Sheriff's Office are actively investigating Nick and Stephanie's murders with over 40 binders of case material. It's the most evidence collected in any Colorado cold case, which is just, I mean, you just have to think they've got more than what they're sharing.
Well, it seems like it's probably time to release a little bit more info. Give us something out of those 40 binders to try to, maybe it'll, spur somebody's memory, or somebody may have known this person, was friends with this person back at this time.
Seems like it wouldn't do much harm. I mean, I guess, what do I know? I don't know what's in those binders, but it seems like it would do more good than harm.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll talk about it in a sec, but with all the rewards put up over the years, there's been nothing.
In 2017, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation retested some of the forensic evidence found at the scene. However, despite the large amount of evidence that they found, no new leads were generated from that. In 2021, a special reward of $100,000 was raised for information that led to an arrest in the case. While that reward has unfortunately since lapsed, if you do know anything about the murders of Nick Kunselman and Stephanie Hart-Grizzell, you can contact Metro Denver Crime Stoppers at 720-913-7867 or submit an anonymous tip to metrodenvercrimestoppers.com.
And I think that's, important to note is that was in 2021. They were able to generate this $100,000 reward. But I think even though they have these 40 binders of evidence, tons and tons of evidence, what they need is one testimony. They need one person to call in and connect a dot that maybe we're not seeing because we don't know what the evidence is. But I'm certain, or at least I hope, that reward comes back around and it can generate something.
I don't understand why rewards really ever lapse unless there's a reason for them to. But yeah, just horrible.
I agree with you, Ian. I think there needs to be, it'd be great if we could help get a reward fund going and, help generate some further interest in this case. And all it takes is one piece of evidence. That's what the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office is saying on their website. They still have a page for it on the Jefferson County website. And there's also some info to contact their cold case investigator as well, which we'll put in the description. But yeah, I really don't know what happened at the end of the day. It's just a really, really unfortunate situation. I did see that Nick Kunselman's mother, Wendy, did pass in 2012. And I believe after this happened, it looks like his mother and most of his family actually moved out of the area. I hope for the sake of their families that, they're able to get justice at some point. I think seems like it should be a solvable case. It's just missing a piece of info. But we want to know your thoughts as always. But we're going to wrap up today's episode there. Appreciate you for joining, and we'll catch you guys next time.